All right, so we're back to review in our top 10 Star Trek episodes, The City on the Edge of Forever, which is one of the last episodes, if not the last episode in the first season. And this primarily deals with time travel, going back in time. Bones ends up getting injected accidentally with this stuff that kind of makes him go crazy. He ends up jumping through this portal that I believe the Guardian is the name, who is an entity, it would appear, that's been there for long before humans existed and will be there long after. And anyway, Spock and Kirk have to go back in time to, well, slightly ahead before McCoy arrives there and save him. And this is, in the early 1900s. What is this, around 1930 or so? This is around the Great Depression era. And Kirk ends up falling in love with a woman there. And the main plot, or I guess theme of this, is the trolley problem, right? The trolley dilemma. And I want to kind of open that up to both of you first, right? So the idea being, is it better to sacrifice one for the sake of many, or save one and damn the many? And this is represented well in the trolley problem of, would you push somebody onto a train to prevent it from hitting a city and blowing it up, or not?
I always heard the pull the lever. Do you pull the lever and right? So I know what you're referring to. I get you.
Well,
sorry.
Here's my thing. I'm going to be honest. Logically, it's better to sacrifice the one and save the many. But if you put me in a position where it was somebody I loved, I would be hard pressed to follow the logic. I have 3 children. If the trolley was going to hit one, and I could switch the tracks and it kill 100 other people, the 100 other people are going to die. I'm not letting my child die. Do I think that it would be more logical? Would it theoretically be better overall for society to let my child die? In that case, yes. And if it were a random stranger, I wouldn't have any dilemma with that. Let the stranger get hit. But man, when you put it in the context of somebody that you love, that becomes a whole different problem. And this episode was the first time I ever really appreciated Kirk's character as human, as something beyond just a figurehead, the hero for the story, because he got personally involved. He fell in love with this woman, and does he let her go on to be famous and meet with the president, or does he let her die, or what? And this episode I thought was very touching in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's an exceptionally difficult problem that honestly there's never an end to, because you can change scenarios so much, right? So, okay, would you kill one child to save two of your children, right? And so on and so forth, right? It can become very problematic. Or, hey, would you sacrifice one child to know that the rest of your children go on and their grandchildren live, and so on and so forth, right? Because that the idea, particularly in this episode, right, is one minor change. This woman who ends up living instead of dying changes the outcome in the future projection for all of humanity and the universe, it would appear, right?
Yeah, the chaos theory.
And so it's a fun philosophical debate, especially to have with friends and things like that. But at the end of the day, kind of what you said, right? A pragmatic, logical approach to this would most definitely be, yes, you sacrifice the one. Although, interestingly enough, something I guess you could consider is, well, is the future what you hoped it to be and want it to be, right? Maybe you make the change. Now, I forget exactly what they saw in the episode. It definitely changes their world.
Remember, their world ceases to exist, to where there's no such thing as Starfleet. There's no Enterprise.
Right.
There's nothing. If
Right.
whatever McCoy changed in the future, i.e., her living and all that, and that leads into the crazy thing about it. Like that's why this stuff is just so wild to talk about it because it's completely speculative. But that whole chaos theory thing, it's this never-ending loop of what ifs, which makes me kind of lend my idea to the idea of potentially multiverses or whatever. But if it weren't for the existence of the Enterprise and Spock and Dr. McCoy, et cetera, would this woman have died in the first place? Et cetera. Like,
It wouldn't have happened according at least to, so that's the other interesting take, right, is time travel theory. And there's
Right.
all different types of
Yeah,
versions of them. In this one, it would appear to be a looped
right.
timeline, right? To where, yeah, like you said, if the Enterprise and McCoy and all this didn't happen, he wouldn't have died to begin with, which wouldn't have put them in the future position to have gone back. So it's kind of that time loop.
Yeah, it's
right.
that weird loop scenario where it's just. But like Dad said, as far as the episode itself, that's what I agree with as far as Kirk. Up until that point, Kirk was kind of. I didn't dislike his character at all, but like Dad said, he kind of seemed robotic, which I guess you kind of need to be as a captain of a damn starship. But yeah, becoming directly involved in something that's pointed out in it that makes it so much more personal is the fact that McCoy, like he said, I could have saved her, but it was Captain Kirk that intervened and stopped McCoy.
Yeah, and Spock has to let him know he knows.
Yeah, he knows. Yeah, and he's the one like that question that we spoke to in a previous review about service, that obligation to one's duty. And in this instance, Kirk sacrificed something that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life in order to preserve and uphold his duty to his crew members and the people that he said he was going back to try to help. So
it's interesting that you two took it that view, because I did not see it that way with Kirk and whatnot. Firstly, I've found Kirk to show a great deal of humanity, empathy, compassion, things like that throughout the series. And in fact, I kind of thought it was a bit strange that it was such a tough decision for him, given that this far into the season, right, he's flirted with, presumably slept with, been in other relationships with numerous other women, beings, what have you. So it seemed a bit strange that, well, why is this one
different?
Such a strong connection? Why is it so different? Right. To me, it was like, well, it's just another woman that he's sleeping with. I mean, granted, you can very quickly garner feelings and care for somebody, but to the point where you wouldn't allow history to play out knowing full well, it didn't seem like it should have been that big of a decision for him, to me.
Yeah,
well, but that's thinking
logically, not thinking with one's emotions. So in this, I just kind of give it to like, yeah, maybe this one was one that he legit fell in love with. That's how I like it.
Well, I think, number one, that some people can experience that intensity and depth of emotion in those relationships, in those intimate love relationships, every time, right?
Yeah,
and they might go through 5, 6, 8, in their lifetime, whatever, but that intensity and depth is there, every one. Now, is it sustainable? Maybe for some, maybe for others, no. I don't know, but I believe that intensity and depth can be there each and every time. The thing that I would point out, time travel wise, is that the crew people from the Enterprise were superfluous, right? In the quote unquote real world, the world that happened before they landed there with the Guardian, she had died, and Starfleet was born, and blah blah blah. And they went back and they wanted to prevent McCoy from changing it, but McCoy didn't change anything. She had already crossed the street, which, if that was how she was going to die in an accident, it might have already happened.
But what was her reason for crossing the street?
Well, who knows? Maybe she's going back to the soup kitchen for a second shift or whatever.
No,
Whatever
remember
it
she was going on a date with I think it
Kirk.
was a date that she was going on with Kirk, which was the only reason to have been out to begin with. And I'm pretty sure there was some discussion. It had something to do, I'm pretty sure, with being with Kirk is what set up this
That's what
entire
happened
line
because,
of events.
yeah, because they were heading back to the place, and she said, "You sound just like the man that came to the mission or whatever the other day." And he said, "Oh yeah, who's that?" She says, "Dr. McCoy." And he says, "Dr. McCoy, Leonard McCoy?" And she says, "Yes,
Right.
do you know him?" And then he takes off and tells her to stay there.
Yeah, and then
He runs across the street and gets into the altercation with McCoy, and then she coming to find out what happened. So it was their presence in the first place that was the catalyst to her demise, which set up the future. And that
No, I think you're missing my point. If this is a loop thing, like you guys were talking about, and this was the first iteration of it, okay, then that means that her death occurred one time without any involvement in them. So what took her out of the building and what exactly killed her, we don't know. But originally, without their interference, she was supposed to have died.
Well,
I see what you're saying. I'll make two comments on it, though. One, the first is that is a possibility, right? The idea, it's unfalsifiable, right? No matter what happens, she's going to die. It doesn't matter whether
we just know that she dies that way in their future.
With that being said, it doesn't negate the possible time loop, right? Every time in history that we get to this point with the Federation and Kirk, that's when they go back. They end up getting back to the Enterprise, and life keeps going on. So the first time, this might not have been their first time of her dying, right? It's a continuation. So we don't know. It could have been the very quote unquote first time to how we got to Kirk and all of them in the Enterprise. Maybe that already happened once before.
No, and I also think that
that's why I gave the caveat if this were the first iteration of their return.
And I think that's an interesting take actually on not just time travel, but I experience this a lot, or I think about it a lot in just everyday life, right? Is these unfalsifiable talking points to where, well, if X wouldn't have happened, then Y wouldn't have happened. You don't know that.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't know that whatsoever, right?
State that, right?
Oh, had you not spanked your child when they were a kid, they wouldn't have grown up to be a terror, right? You don't know that.
Or had you spanked your child, they would have grown up.
Exactly. Had you don't spare the rod and spoil the child, it could have turned out entirely different. You just don't know. So oftentimes when you get into those arguments, I mean, I enjoy having them just from a intellectual perspective, but you can't know.
For sure. I agree 100%. Question, though, this is completely off topic, only related to the episode in as much as the machine or whatever it was called. I am not a machine.
The Guardian.
The Guardian. I'm not a machine. I'm not an organism. It kind of reminded me of a cross between the computer, the ultimate machine, and Hitchhiker's Galaxy, and a cross between that and the Watchers or Overseers or whatever they were called in the Rick and Morty episode, the gigantic rocks that just watch them. Oh, the Observers. That's what they were called. We are just the Observers.
Oh, yeah, the Observers.
Yeah, we just observe. He's like, are you sure about that? And, they're actively involved. But, yeah, that machine thing, the Guardian, was kind of a weird thing for me.
Well, what's interesting about it is the Guardian itself states that it was built. It had a creator.
Yeah.
Right? Which begs the question, if it's been here, it's the Guardian of Forever. And if the Guardian of Forever has been around presumably forever, what predated forever? Exactly?
Right. That was
an interesting.
Yeah, it's really, really weird.
Cool little sci-fi aspect of it.
Yeah, it is.
All right, here, since we're on that, is the first amoeba still alive?
Well, by that,
asexual reproduction, right?
Yep, it splits in half, then it's 2, then they split in half, there's 4, it splits in half, there's 8.
I think that would depend on how you define it, right? Because you could define it to the point where, yes, it's the same one, and then also no. Kind of similar to like jellyfish, right? There's certain jellyfish that they live forever, theoretically, because
they're effectively immortal, right?
Yeah.
They can do that reverse cellular.
But see, I would argue that no. right? And I'd argue no. I'd argue yes from like a genetic standpoint, possibly, but no from a pragmatic standpoint because experience would be different, right? So, for example, you can have twins, identical DNA, however, their own experience could be different. And I mean, it could be something as small as, well, who walked out of the door first?
Even within the same household, no two children grow up in the same household. Even
Correct.
twins. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And the other thing, go ahead, Dad.
It's that old philosophical thing of you get a ship, and over the course of years, you replace different planking, and you replace different supports inside, and you replace this and that,
Right,
such that after 25 years, is it the same ship?
Right.
Maybe here's an interesting, just throw it out there because I'm a big Paul Stamets fan. Maybe the Guardian, especially with the way you look at it, in terms of the way it's built, sure, it's got the lights and everything like that, but we know that there are phosphorescent fungi species within our own planet. Maybe the Guardian is universal mycelium. It's the mycelium that whenever asteroids, meteors, whatever hit the Earth, that's what put it here. And it's all throughout the universe. And that's how it's the Watcher, because the biomass of mycelium is interconnected, even across interstellar space.
Would still beg the question of what created it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
well, okay, maybe, because we think of ourselves as individuals, but we're not. If you take out the billions of bacteria in you, you are no longer you, and you die. Or if you take out the billions of viruses that are in you, you are no longer you, and you die. We are a composite creature. Who thinks that we're just one. Maybe the Guardian came about through composite creatures that got together and formed a symbiosis so it can remember its creation, but those parts were always there, so it is both built and forever.
I have to push back on that, because even though we have bacteria and viruses within us, that is not what makes us up. We are our own cell structures.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, that's like saying take away water and we die. Well, yeah, no shit, but I'm not like I mean, again, like the human, you could theoretically nuke all the bacteria. Well, I mean, that's what happens, right? Look at chemotherapy or antibiotics or things like that. You are nuking aspects of it. And granted, I'll condone that. Yes, you will die eventually, but not immediately. So I don't know. I get what you're saying, but I would say that we are definitely not our own thing, because then that would put the argument into like, well, what makes up bacteria and what makes up viruses? If everything is a composite of other things.
Yeah.
I will ask two similarly related questions, I guess. One, do you think in this trolley type of problem, is it morally justified to murder? Whether through commission or omission. In this case, it was omission, right? Not acting to save the life when you knew what was going to happen and you could have done it. And by murder, I don't mean just general murder, right, to defend somebody, but in this particular case, is it morally justified to have done what they did?
Technically, I would argue this one was by commission, in as much as he stopped McCoy from moving.
Okay. I guess commissioned by one, omission by the others.
Yeah, fair enough. Either way, yeah, that's splitting hairs.
I guess is it both justified morally, and also I guess even like biblically from a more Christian perspective, since I think we're all more familiar with that. Do you think this would be a justifiable thing in the eyes of God?
Well, I don't know about the eyes of God, but while I'm sure there are a number of people that would argue for it, me being the person that I am, I'll say, okay, so let's take it to the logical extreme. And at that point, you can no longer point fingers at Hitler for the, Dr. Mengele experiments, or at Unit, what was it, 731 from the Japanese.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I'd touch on that one, though, and here's a big difference between this is a known, right? So they had the foresight from the Guardian and understanding, right? They knew for a fact this is how things would play out, right? Whereas if you get into real life and humans and everything else, it's, well, here's what I believe will happen if we don't act in this manner, or here's what I think is going to happen if we don't. You don't know the future. In this case, you know the future. So does knowing the future, knowing what's going to happen, does that justify certain actions?
In my opinion, it does. Yeah, especially for this one. Yes, in my opinion, it's justified. If you're talking about it specifically just as the trolley experiment, wherein the single person on the track versus the 5, 10, 50, however many people you want to have on the other track that said train is barreling to, the assumption is that you know neither or none of them, not the single person nor the 100 people that are going to die. It's just a question of ethically, are you morally justified in pulling that lever to divert that train to a single person in order to save these 10 people, 5 people, whatever. And very interesting question. And without diving into minutiae and making up different circumstances, stranger versus stranger, if we're looking at it from the Judeo-Christian values, that in and of itself creates a problem, because if God has a will on earth, who am I to intervene or try to intervene in God's will? Well, the train's already on the track headed towards those 5 people. Who am I to stop it? But then I can also make the argument, well, God put me here at this moment in time with this lever here that I can divert it in order to save these people by sacrificing this one. So I guess it all boils down to how you split it up in your own head. But for me, if it was all strangers, then yeah, I'm pulling the lever, and I would sleep well at night, in knowing that I did what I thought was best in order to preserve as much life and prevent as much suffering as possible, even though some suffering and some loss was necessary.
And wouldn't it be sucky if after you pulled that lever and you got home and you're feeling okay about yourself because you just saved 10 people and only one person died, you found out that the person you killed was going to be the savior of humanity, and the 10 people that you saved were the architects of the downfall?
Yeah, exactly, right? That's one of the issues you have. Well, and that's, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Dark Knight.
Guardians.
No, the Dark Knight with the 2 boats in Joker.
Yeah,
and
the prisoners.
It's the prisoners versus just your average people. Civilians, citizens.
They had their chance.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing. I'll ask, do you think that Kirk and Spock should have just told Edith the truth? Because I'm a bit of two minds on this. She seems like she was both competent and understanding and everything. I think she would have believed them, first of all. Secondly, I think that she seemed to have the personality to where she would have willingly died to do that. With that being said, given your time travel theories, it could have caused problems, right? If now that she knows, then even if she wants to die, it could stop it or change it, so on and so forth. But in any case, do you think it would have been wise or good to have just told Edith the truth?
I think I might have asked her if she wanted to know the truth, because isn't that the curse of the Cyclops? They wanted to be able to see the future, and the only thing that they can see is their death. So, what do you have to offer her outside of, hey, I want to continue to live. I want the reality that I'm in. I want Starfleet. I want this, that, and the other. And for me to get that, you got to die.
Well, that's where I think from her perspective, right, that was one of the greatest. I think that's why Kirk fell for her so quickly, right? That was the big speech that even Spock enjoyed, where she was talking about how, in the future, we'll have the ability to feed everybody. We're going to be able to travel universes. We're going to be able to, do this, that, and the other. Humanity's really going to advance in the coming decades, centuries, millennia, what have you. And to her, for some people, oh man, I'd more than be willing to sacrifice myself knowing that. So maybe it would have been a great joy to her, especially if you know from your perspective that she's going to die, right? To me, it seems like it almost might be, I don't know if I do it, but it almost might be a compassionate type of thing to let her know that the future which she envisions is a reality.
Is a
And will
reality.
be a reality.
But
It
without
would be
her
a comfort.
dying now, that
Right.
reality never comes to bear. I'm of two minds on this as well. There's a part of me that very much agrees with you on that, and like kind of the humanity and the compassion to let her know that, hey, the future that you envision will happen. However, my only reason why I agree with their not telling her is that regardless of how competent, logical, intelligent a person may be, certain things, when they're presented with them, when certain information is presented to people, they're just unable to digest it. They're unable to process it. And I'm not necessarily saying that they can't process it at some point in time, but given the predicament that they're in, that they need to be effectively lying low, just focusing on their mission to try to get McCoy and whatnot, the potential for her to have some kind of, oh, you're just crazy people or whatever, and push them out of, her inner sphere and out of that mission or whatever that she's running at the time, just because of that, that emotional reaction. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're overloading me with information. You're just playing on my desire for a future, So
Yeah, I agree.
From a pragmatic standpoint, I think it was more of a matter of, I think they wanted to tell her, especially Kirk. I think they did want to tell her, but I think that it was a pragmatic decision that I agree with.
Me too. Because I don't think I would have either. I think they were right in that, because you just don't know how it might change.
Right.
That's right. Time travel 101. Don't mess with anything from the past, because you don't know how it's going to impact the future.
Yeah,
because you're right. Even if she was fine with it, subconsciously, you don't know how it's going to influence certain behavior and whatnot.
Yeah. You can't account for emotions and people dealing with weird stuff.
Well, I didn't have anything else on this one. Did you guys?
No.
When they I will say this.
Asian was funny.
I saw that episode when I was a kid, and the only thing I remembered in it was Spock wearing the toboggan to hide his ears.
I do remember that.
Speaking of that point, that was a point I really liked. It was the idea that this is old Earth. The cops they won't know anything. And they immediately get caught by a cop, right? And this is before radios, really. This is before probably even mass telephones, things like that. Patrol cars, so on. It's just a beat cop walking around and happens to catch them immediately, which I just thought was kind of funny. But
yeah, that was a really funny scene. And then I loved the fact that they were like, well, when Spock says, how do you intend to, explain my appearance? He's like, easy. And then immediately he's presented with the chance.
Yeah. And then he just lets Kirk kind of hang himself. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. Just talk yourself. Good luck.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right. Well, until our next review, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.